When we hear about secret tunnels under London, our minds go straight to the movies. We picture covert spies, heavy steel doors, and agents speaking in passwords. But if you walk down High Holborn today, grabbing a coffee and dodging traffic, you are stepping right over one of the city's strangest hidden spaces. The real story of this underground world started with something entirely ordinary and a lot more desperate. It was built to keep terrified civilians alive. By late 1940, bombs were falling on London. The government initially resisted the idea of deep mass shelters, worrying about costs and crowd control. The reality of the Blitz forced their hand. Families were already fleeing their homes at night, carrying blankets and thermos flasks down to sleep packed tightly on underground platforms. London Transport was brought in to build a network of massive twin tunnels, far beneath the standard tube lines. Digging deep under a major city is incredibly difficult, even in peacetime. Doing it while wartime Britain was starved for steel, concrete, and manpower meant progress was agonizingly slow. Sites were flooded or abandoned, and a planned network of 10 shelters shrank to 8. The origins of this massive subterranean space had absolutely nothing to do with espionage. It was a desperate alteration to the city's geography, dug by hand to hide ordinary people from the sky. Digging took time, and the war moved much faster than the builders. By the time the massive Chancery Lane shelter was finally ready in March 1942, the absolute worst of the Blitz was over. The government suddenly owned a colossal, highly fortified underground city, equipped with bunks and medical posts that the civilians it was meant to save largely didn't need anymore. While a few of the other deep shelters eventually opened to the public, officials held Chancery Lane back. Sitting directly beneath central London, it was simply too deep, too protected, and too perfectly positioned to hand over to civilians. That chronological mismatch created a blank slate. A massive void intended as a public refuge was quietly swallowed by the state and repurposed as a fortified machine room for the war effort. By 1944, the Chancery Lane shelter was officially redesignated as Citadel Accommodation. It was carved up for various government departments, becoming a secure facility where military coordination could continue even if the streets above were leveled by explosives. One large section was handed over to the Special Operations Executive, the branch of British intelligence tasked with coordinating sabotage, hidden radios, and resistance movements in occupied Europe. The tunnels transitioned from passive survival into active offense. Up on the surface of High Holborn, people navigated the rebel and the daily traffic. 100 feet beneath them, intelligence officers were routing coded messages and planning covert strikes far behind enemy lines. There was nothing luxurious about it. Staff received strict instructions to pack their bags and head underground the moment they were ordered. They were told to accept the extreme heat from the equipment, sleep on cots, and endure the claustrophobia, so the war machine wouldn't miss a beat. This facility relied on the most effective cover possible, the sheer grinding reality of a deeply uncomfortable underground office complex where people simply put their heads down and worked. The war ended, and the spies packed up. But as the Soviet Union tested its own nuclear weapons, Britain faced a new existential threat. Hiding human bodies from bombs wasn't enough. The government needed infrastructure that could survive a sudden, catastrophic attack. In 1949, the General Post Office took over the Chancery Lane tunnels. They expanded the space and hauled massive banks of equipment down a specially built goods lift, transforming the bunker into the Kingsway Exchange, an enormous subterranean telephone switchboard, handling long-distance calls. In 1956, this space became the London terminal for TAT-1, the very first transatlantic telephone cable. This underground bunker was now the physical, deeply buried link connecting Britain directly to North America. And yet it functioned like a completely ordinary workplace. 200 staff members spent their days deep underground. They ate in a staff canteen decorated with fake painted windows to stave off the claustrophobia, and they learned to ignore the constant heavy rumble of the Central Line trains passing right over their heads. The definition of national survival had shifted. As the Cold War escalated, the priority was protecting the delicate wires and switches that held global communications together. That communication network was tested to its breaking point in 1962. During the Cuban Missile Crisis, the world came terrifyingly close to nuclear annihilation. One of the biggest dangers was how slow and prone to mistranslation the messages between Washington and Moscow actually were. To fix this, the two superpowers agreed to establish a direct communication link. Pop culture usually pictures this as a glowing red phone sitting on the president's desk, ready to be picked up in a panic. The reality looked like this. The first hotline relied on written messages sent via teletype machines. Text could be translated carefully and deliberately, severely reducing the chance of an accidental war sparked by a misunderstood vocal tone. The physical wire carrying those world-saving messages traced a path from Washington to London and then on to Northern Europe and Moscow. The London segment of that wire passed directly through the Kingsway Exchange. The contrast is almost absurd. While Londoners on the surface bought sandwiches, went to work, and complained about the rain, the communication equipment actively working to prevent a nuclear exchange hummed quietly directly beneath their feet. Hardware eventually expires. By the 1980s, the telecommunications industry was moving towards smaller, faster digital systems. The massive mechanical switchboards housed in Kingsway became terribly inefficient. By 1990, the exchange had closed entirely, relegated to storage. The entrance to this once vital fortress faded into the background of the city, becoming nothing more than a sealed, unremarkable door sitting quietly next to an employment bureau. Decades after it was protected under the strict rules of the Official Secrets Act, the site was eventually put up for sale by British Telecom. In 2023, an agreement was reached to turn this awkward piece of commercial real estate into a public historical attraction by 2028. A facility designed to withstand bombs, coordinate covert European sabotage, and endure nuclear fallout was ultimately defeated by the quiet, relentless march of better technology. It is no surprise that London has secret tunnels. What makes Kingsway unique is how this specific void in the earth survived by constantly adapting to whatever Britain feared most at the time. In 1940, the fear was bombs falling on civilians. In 1944, it was the disruption of military command. By the 1950s and 60s, the ultimate fear was losing communication during a nuclear standoff. The physical space remained exactly the same, but the stakes kept shifting. Kingsway proves that the most effective way to hide a massive state secret isn't to surround it with armed guards or barbed wire. You hide it by disguising it as a mundane, highly useful workplace, complete with bad canteen food and the rumble of the subway. So the next time you walk down High Holborn, remember the ground beneath you. Thousands of people walk over that pavement every single day, completely unaware that they are stepping on a buried machine that repeatedly adapted to save their world.